Kabam, you never fail to disappoint. So, like so many others, I was under the impression that we were going to receive 3 buffs in August. I mean, it's not like they introduced that in March, but to my surprise, it turns out that there were 6 others that they were hiding. Holy heck. So not only does that mean that this is the month with the most buffs we've ever seen in one month, but also, just look at the roster here. Oh man, I'm still geeking out about it. So waiting for the update to eventually come out and I get my grubby little hands on it, test all the characters, and I gotta say, I came to the same conclusion as everyone else.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
That's not to be completely mean or anything. I mean, there are some really good buffs in this list, but also there are some really bad ones, so that's why I'm here. I want to rank all 9 of these from worst to best, because that's what I do now, and every time I've done one of these, nobody has gotten mad at me whatsoever.
I hope you burn in the deepest hole of the hell and then demon appears in front of you.
End communication.
Okay, all that aside, let's get straight into the video now, shall we? 9th place is going straight to Night Thrasher, and there is no competition. Okay, now time for a little ham tangent, because that's what I do sometimes. I was so on board for this buff. I mean, you didn't even have to convince me that much. Look at his suit, look at his skateboard. I was fully on board. I thought there was no possible way that this guy was going to be bad, and unfortunately, he was bad. Now, before I start absolutely trashing on this buff, I think it's fair to talk about what actually changed first, so here we go. He got some more timer increases for his debuffs and his precision. He now has a set 35% chance to inflict the taunt instead of it being a scaling through his SIG ability. I think he got a 30% increase to his critical damage here. I'm not too sure. Someone can clarify that for me. And then the big one, he can now purify 1 debuff off of himself every time he knocks the opponent down. So if you ask me, there's 3 real pros when it comes to Night Thrasher now. It used to be 2 in my opinion, but now he has 1 more thing. And the new thing that he has, the Purify, you might think it's not really that good because it's only 1 debuff every time you knock the opponent down. But the way Night Thrasher's loop works, you're always using heavy attacks knocking the opponent down. So you're purifying a lot more than you would actually think. And then the 2 other pros that he has, in my opinion, is a very solid damage output, as well as the skateboard attacks. Now, if you ask me, most people are probably going to pick up Night Thrasher because of the utility that the skateboard brings, because it allows them to counter 2 pretty annoying matchups that just got introduced, and that is Spider-Woman and MODOK. More on MODOK later down the list. Now, because of how new both these champions are, we don't really know the impact that they're going to have entirely. I mean, more so Spider-Woman, because she's been out for a while, and she is pretty much a mainstay on both attack and defense. So that's something that Night Thrasher has going for him. And honestly, that's the extent of what I'll go about for the positives of Night Thrasher, because I really want to talk about a couple of issues I have with him, mainly his utility. So I did just talk about his utility. It's not the worst, but also I do think it's pretty outdated in terms of 2025 standards. When I initially heard about the Night Thrasher buff, I thought the first thing they were going to do is, 1, make maybe the buffs and debuffs passives, because, I don't know, skill champion, it's whatever, I don't really care. But also, I thought that the gadget debuffs were going to change. Now, obviously, the Disorient on the light attack can stay, that's completely fine by me. But the Incinerate and Shock, honestly, in today's standards, please, just get rid of them. If you ask me, both Shock and Incinerates are the 2 most punishable damage over time effects in this game, and also, they don't really do anything, because Night Thrasher's damage is based off his basic attacks, not the damage over time that he has. It's like 400 per tick. That's absolutely nothing in today's standards. So honestly, I thought it was going to change into more utility-focused things like suppression and maybe, I don't know, what debuffs exist in this game that fix skill champions. Okay, rambling aside. The other thing I don't really like about him is his matchup versatility. So I did say that he can do Spider-Woman and MODOK. In my opinion, I don't really think he's the best for Spider-Woman. I mean, he's not a hard counter. Sure, he can counter the evade, but the main gimmick about Spider-Woman isn't really the high evade chance, that's whatever. I think the biggest thing about Spider-Woman is the encroaching and snare that she has, because if that triggers on you, you have a lot of issues, because she throws a special 1, you can't dex it, and then you're sad. So, in my personal opinion, although you can counter her evade, she still needs to be micromanaged a lot, as similar to a lot of other characters you'd be using against her. The only difference is that she won't be playing Dance Dance Revolution on your ass 24/7. And then, in terms of other matchups, I don't know. I don't really see any use for his utility in any of the meta matchups that you'd see. So, yeah, I don't really see a purpose as to why he received a buff, unlike others like Voodoo and Obsidian, where it's very clear what their targets were. And so, let's talk about the 8th spot on this list now. And surprise, surprise, it's another skill champion, it's Patriot. So, a lot of the issues I talked about with Night Thrasher in terms of not really knowing what matchups he can do outside of like 1 or 2 he was targeted for, kind of apply here with Patriot, just to a 110% extreme. He was designed solely to be a photon counter, and the problem that I had with Patriot wasn't that he could not really do photon that well. He obviously does it very well. It's that one, he doesn't really do anything outside of that, and two, there's just better alternatives. Now, if this was made a couple months ago with all these buffs, I think that this guy would be dead last, but there's a couple factors that made me appreciate him more, and one, that was the fall of Mantis, and two, Alliance War. I'm not really going to talk about the fall of Mantis that much, it's just less competition for him, but the main thing is that Alliance War, the way that it's designed, you want to be playing fights very safely, and the way that Patriot works for Photon, he's very safe for Photon, so the chances of messing up with him are minimal. And that's what kind of swayed me to put him above Night Thrasher, whereas unlike Night Thrasher, where his target matchup, it's still a little bit risky and there's room for error, with Patriot, it is so safe. There is quite little room for error. But again, that's not really my issues with Patriot, which is why he's so low. It's that, again, he's not really good for anything outside of Photon, and that buff didn't really change anything about that. It just made him easier to use against that Photon matchup specifically. So yeah, not really much to talk about here. If you enjoyed Patriot before, you're gonna love him a lot more. If you didn't really enjoy him that much, you're still gonna feel the exact same way about him. All right, moving on to spot number 7, and that is, in my opinion, Sabretooth. This is the buff I wanted to put in dead last the most, but after some testing,
It's radical.
and honestly, he has the makings to be the worst champion on this list. I mean, he has zero focus in terms of which matchups he wants to take. I mean, there's not really any skill champions that he really counters at all. He just does damage. But the reason I put him above those two is because, goddammit, he knows how to deal some damage. So the main things that change with Sabretooth are, 1, the Furies that stack on top of the ones you already converted now have extended duration and potency, so that makes them a lot stronger. And 2, the most important thing, he starts with 5 Furies in Battlegrounds now. So now that means you can have 10 Furies in Battlegrounds on top of all the other ones you get once you hit your Fury conversion cap. And Sabretooth at 5 Furies, let alone 10, hits really hard. So I guess you can say he kind of hits the Starkey archetype, where you just get big damage from your first hit and then you just kind of kill the opponent, not really focusing on utility and all that. So yeah, in my opinion, he's a pretty solid Battlegrounds champion, but also he's a character with flaws. Some really big flaws, honestly. So let's talk about him. The main one is the lack of utility. Obviously, he has some pretty good damage, but the severe lack of utility does kind of limit him in terms of versatility. We'll have to see how he fares in the coming months, if he becomes a pretty solid attacker or just kind of fizzles out because he can't really do any matchups in the first place. And the other thing is that his persistent charges, I thought were going to get set at an interval of 6. It's still between 3 and 6, meaning that it is completely RNG based if you decide to use him in anything other than Battlegrounds like Story Quest or Alliance War, because if you start with 3 persistent charges, you're going to get a lot less damage as opposed to if you were to start with 6 persistent charges and you can keep ramping those Furies. I really wish it was just set at 6. It would have made him a lot better for story questing. And yeah, honestly, only time's going to tell with this buff. I doubt he's going to rise above any of the others on this list, but I can see him dropping beneath Night Thrasher and Patriot, but we'll have to see in the coming months. Now, moving on to number 6, it's Dr. Voodoo, my second most anticipated buff of this batch. And I'm going to be fully transparent with you. In the rough draft of this video, he was dead last, but then I watched Nick136's video and my opinion on him changed quite a hefty amount. And honestly, can you really blame me for ranking him so lowly at the start? They only changed one big thing, and that's that he can counter MD now. So every time you throw a heavy attack, you drain half a bar of power to place a Loa on the opponent. And like I said before, this was meant to counter MD because previous Voodoo didn't have any way to counter that, and he nullified so many buffs that when you threw special 1, you'd shoot straight up to 2 to 3 bars of power, and it would kind of just mess up your loop entirely. And here's the art of letting other people do the research for you. It was discovered that because of this change, you can have some pretty effective cheese mechanics. But yeah, other than that control in fights, which is great, there are some things that are really holding him back in my opinion. So if you were to ask me, there's 3 things that are holding him back, and that's 1, his competition, 2, his damage, and 3, the setup to even get to the cheese in the first place. So the first thing is 1, the setup. So he places Loas on the opponent. It's about 20% chance if you're awakened, 10% if you're not. This can go pretty haywire pretty fast because, especially in the Dark Phoenix fight, if you don't really get your Loas at the start and she throws a special attack before you even get any poisons up, it's just going to be a pretty bad time with that Nova Flame. So yeah, it is kind of unfortunate that his setup is pretty RNG dependent, meaning that stuff can go bad pretty quickly. The other thing that's kind of unfortunate is his damage is unchanged from 2016, meaning that he is kind of going to be on the slower side in terms of the Dark Phoenix and Serpent matchups. And that's kind of a problem because the other thing that's holding him back is his competition in the form of Nika Minoru. Now, personally, Nika Minoru is just pretty stupid, but also she's so stupid in the fact that she can just do Dark Phoenix and Serpent so easily that there's not really a reason for Voodoo yet, in my opinion. It really just depends on how safe he is as an option for both of them. If he's safer than Nico Minoru, then he might see some use, but if not, he can slide down the list. Now moving to 5th place on this list, it is Viv Vision, the champion that didn't receive a buff, just a couple bug fixes. You're virtually getting the exact same character that you got pre-Rebirth, but in my opinion, she was pretty solid before then, so that's why she's pretty high up on the list here. Honestly, most of the characters here, other than Night Thrasher, are kind of whatever in my opinion. I'd say that they have their pretty good niches, but yeah, back to Viv Vision. Obviously, the best thing she has going for her, in my opinion, is the ability to weave in and out of conflict quite easily with her phase mechanic. It's definitely the biggest draw when it comes to her character, because it's pretty easy to go around any fight without taking any damage whatsoever. And honestly, I don't really know what else to talk about with the character. In my opinion, she's just a pretty solid middle-of-the-road character. Nothing too bad, but nothing too amazing either. So yeah, moving on to spot number 4, this is the second of the batch program buffs, and that is MODOK. Now, before we got news on the Rebirth buffs, this was by far my most anticipated buff of the program, because I'll be honest, I don't really care for Patriot or Yondu that much. And honestly, the reason for my excitement is because I thought we were going to get a Red Skull level buff where he becomes pretty good on both offense and defense. We didn't really get that. He's just a really good defender. If we were to talk about him on offense, he would, without a shadow of a doubt, be last on the list here. So yeah, honestly, this is a pretty difficult one to talk about because he doesn't really fit the category of all the other ones I've talked about before where they're solely offensive champions. This one's a defender, and there's not really any other defenders on this list other than maybe Yondu, but I don't really know. So yeah, the main thing about MODOK now is his force field. It was always kind of annoying, but now it is just on a whole nother level. If you want to attack him while he's stunned, he will purify the stun and auto block you. He can bypass auto block countering mechanics like True Strike and True Sense. I don't think he can counter True Accuracy, meaning Night Thrasher is an option. And then he also has a Steadfast while it's up now, so that means you can't kind of cheese through it with Unblockable. And the biggest thing by far is that the auto block can now trigger parry, meaning that if you decide to trigger the auto block, you will get stunned and then you're in for a world of hurting. So yeah, here's the things I'll say about MODOK quite briefly. The two things that are gonna determine if he's a meta champion or not is 1, the Battlegrounds metas that are coming in the next few months, and 2, the champions that counter him and how often we get champions that counter him. In terms of counter ability, honestly, anyone can counter him right now. All you have to do is heavy attack him and then the force field goes on cooldown, so that means you can kind of wail on him until it goes back up. And the best thing about this is that you can see when the force field's about to trigger again. But the biggest thing for him on defense will probably be the fact that Na hates parry. And that's kind of a problem because 1, you can't really heavy punish him because his heavy attack just keeps him so far away from him. So yeah, you're gonna have to find champions that either are stun immune on auto block or can kind of go around the auto block like Night Thrasher, of course. But yeah, I think he's gonna have a pretty solid use in a couple war spots and then obviously in Battlegrounds because you never really see parry in Battlegrounds metas anymore, do you? And now we're at the top 3, and in my opinion, these ones are pretty good. So starting off with the bronze spot here, it is Yondu, surprisingly. Now I need to take back everything I said about him because remember when I said that he was the worst buff of all time in top 10 worst buffs? I don't think he's that anymore. So what changed about Yondu to make me like him so much now? Well, there's a couple things for that. 1, his Fury Cap on the special 2 decreased, meaning the opponent has to throw less special attacks. 2, the bleed is now a 100% chance to trigger, meaning that it is guaranteed, and that makes so many more abilities so much more consistent. And 3, I already talked about it, is consistency. I love how consistent Yondu is now. I mean, just the proc chance of the Yaka arrow damage over time going from 40% to 100% chance, it changes so much about his kit, because before you never really knew about the combat power rate reduction, you never knew if you're going to get 0% or 50%. Now that it's 100%, you can very safely say that you're always going to have combat power rate reduction, which is so good. I mean, yeah, you can say that that kind of adds a little bit more to the contradiction because you're always going to know that you're going to have the opponents having less power to throw special attacks, but I don't know, I think it's fine. In my opinion, the Fear on activation kind of redeems it a lot because it is the perfect balance of just needing the opponent to throw special attacks as a bonus as opposed to before where it was very much a necessity in order to get any sort of damage whatsoever. And another thing that I think was pretty worthwhile is that the heal block duration on the special one also got an increase in time. So pre-buff actually now, I was always under the premise that you had to choose between damage and heal block because you couldn't really do both because the heal block would always lose duration by the time you got to special 2. Now it's just long enough to where you can throw both, and it's pretty good, honestly. So I'd say that this version of Yondu made all the right changes to make him a pretty solid champion. I don't think he's going to break any records, obviously, unlike the other 2 on this list, which are, in my opinion, going to become very mainstay. I think he's just a very solid option to add to your roster. Now, I already kind of spoiled it, but number 2 and number 1 in terms of the August buffs are stupid. They are dumb. And honestly, I don't really know which one would be the second and first spot, but after a lot of debating in my head, I think that number 2 has to be Anti-Venom. One change is all he needed to become so good, and that was the fact that when you throw a special 2, instead of losing all of your debuffs, you keep the 2 most recent ones that you placed. That is huge. So I think most people agreed that Anti-Venom would have been a very solid champion, if not for the fact that he was the literal embodiment of choose between damage and utility with the way Special 2 used to work. But now with this change, he's not really that anymore. He gets both damage and utility, and that is a massive win in terms of the Anti-Venom fan club. So the reason that Anti-Venom's utility was so important and why losing it was so detrimental is because the utility he had countered like regen and power gain and just ability accuracy and stuff. So losing that means that they get all their abilities again, and then you're basically back at square one. Whereas some other characters, if they lose their utility, it's not the biggest problem in the world, but for him, it was really detrimental. So basically having the ability to have both damage and utility means that he's a very solid damage dealer, and you don't have to worry about screwing up once you lose all your utility now. Like seriously, I can't stress about how little of a change Anti-Venom got, but how impactful it was. He is the same character, except for he just gets some utility on the special too. I keep saying that, but it is crazy how much he's elevated in terms of viability now because of that. But yeah, that's Anti-Venom at spot number 2, and spot number 1 is Cull Obsidian. It is no surprise that people love damage champions. I mean, just look at Cyclops, in my opinion, a very mid character that people love for some reason. We'll talk about that in a second, but yeah, a lot of people have been giving Cull so much credit, and for once, I agree. So what honestly changed about Cull? So 1, he gets 3 charges in Battlegrounds. That's about it, honestly. I mean, that's really the most worthwhile one. There's another change in here that I like a lot, and it's that Thanos' favor can be maintained throughout the fight now, as opposed to pre-buff where you would always lose it because the pause duration was so short. It's really good in my opinion. But yeah, Cull Obsidian's damage is unchanged in my opinion from 2019, and it really shows that this character was just stupid before, but he just needed slight tweaks to become super viable. And the reason why I decided to put him at number 1 as opposed to Anti-Venom is just because he is a hard counter to a lot of tech champions, and mainly Zola, and Zola is a very annoying tech defender right now with not that many options, as opposed to someone like Voodoo, who's a lot lower down the list. He doesn't really have that much competition, and I think he's the best competition by far for Zola right now. And that's not why I think he's the number 1 spot. I think the best thing about him is, yes, he's a damage dealer, sure, but he's not just that. He's a damage dealer with some very good universal utility for any fight. And unlike another very high damage dealer that released this year, it's not really an uphill battle to keep that utility maintained. So he really has 2 big bits of utility, and that is the ability to parry non-contact attacks and True Focus. In Battlegrounds, you get the True Focus at the start, and there's not really any external factors to keeping it up. Nope, once you get it, you have it. And that's the same for the parry non-contact attacks. It's not like you have to do anything else in order to keep it up. You just get it, and it's there for the rest of the fight. And honestly, that's great, because those are 2 bits of utility that are kind of rare to see, in my opinion. And they're just pretty good for a lot of fights that you wouldn't really think that they're good for. And because Cull Obsidian has such good damage, it just makes him so much better. And I honestly think he's going to be one of the top Cosmics after this. And yeah, that's my opinion on the 9 buffs ranked from worst to best. If you have any other opinions, please feel free to go into the comments below, tell me your opinion. And yeah, I'm Ham, you've seen my video, goodbye.